Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli here. Welcome to a brand new edition of In the Shop. Now I've got a good one for you today. You know, I get asked all the time, what are some good old school lures that worked years ago that still work today? It's a great question, and I am a tackle junkie. I've been fishing since the 80s. I have almost every lure I've ever fished, and I can tell you there are a lot of old lures that still work today. But in this In the Shop, I'm going to give you my 3 top old school lures that still catch bass today. And these are lures that I would even use in tournament situations. So these lures really do still catch a lot of fish. And here they go, in no particular order. The first one is a lure that's not only old school, but it's also one of the first lures I ever fished for bass. Largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass, doesn't matter. And my first old school lure that still works today to catch bass is the good old Rapala original floating minnow. A Rapala floating minnow. What a timeless bait. What a classic bait. You've probably seen these. You probably have one in your box, or your dad or your grandfather. They have these in their box. And guess what? They still work today. The great thing about that original floating minnow comes in a lot of sizes, from little itsy bitsy number 5s all the way up to giant ones that work for pike and muskie and saltwater. But this original floater, my 2 favorite sizes, these are the sizes that I carry with me to this day, is the size 9, the F9, and then the F11. The floating 9 and the floating 11. And when you look at these lures, they're so simple. The floating minnow looks like a jerkbait, right? It has jerkbait characteristics, and it is a jerkbait, but it's made of balsa. And it's one of the key attributes to these floating minnows is that this is a balsa wood lure, which is super subtle, super finesse. And in certain situations, this style jerkbait will outfish any of the modern jerkbaits made today. So when you look at it, it's real simple. It's a piece of balsa. It's got 2 or 3 treble hooks on it, and that's it. And the beauty of the simplicity is why it works. And I want to give you a couple of the ways that I fish this thing to this day and why it's still a killer. You know, the first one is I use the original Rapala floating minnow as a topwater bait. Not as a jerk bait, but as a topwater bait. And because it's made of balsa, this thing is extremely, extremely buoyant. You know, my general rule of thumb is I like to twitch this bait and create a dive and then a float. And this is how I learned how to fish it in the early 80s, and it still works to this day. So using it as a topwater bait. And, you know, when you pull it, when you twitch it, that bill wants to take it from the surface and pull it down. It catches water. So it'll have a shake to it, and all I do is jerk or pull, and it pulls it down, and then I let it float back up. And it wobbles up a little, hits the top, and floats on the surface. It's a great imitator of dying bait, right? And that's a lot of times when bait's dying. A little minnow, a little shad, a little herring. That's what they look like. Again, think about how subtle this bait is when you're fishing it like that on the top, right? No rattles, look. No rattles, no noise. It's not plastic. It's balsa. And it has that very subtle, slow floating back to the top. It's a great way to fish it on the surface as a surface bait. I really like to let those ripples dissipate, let it have a long pause, twitch it, comes down, floats back up. And those fish will smash it as it sits on the top because it looks like something that's an easy meal, okay? So as a topwater, as a jerk bait, traditional jerk bait, this thing can be phenomenal. And again, think about the subtlety of this floating minnow versus modern jerk baits. Modern jerk baits are rattling, they're loud, they're noisy, they have metal balls that make them suspend, they have flash, crazy, noisy. Look at this original minnow. Quiet, balsa, subtle colors. This is gold foil. I love silver foil as well. Just subtle baits. But when you're fishing them as a jerk bait, they have a lot less movement. These have a lot tighter and more natural movement. And I'll fish it the same exact way you fish a regular jerk bait, right? With a series of twitches and pauses. And this thing's a lot tighter, a lot more subtle on the rise, slow rise. And when the water's super clear or everybody's fishing a jerk bait, I've went behind people with the original minnow and caught them really well. Number 3, and then we're going to go on to the next bait, is using the original floater as a sight fishing bait, as a tool for spawning bass. I know right now there's a lot of people watching this that are saying, why did you give that one away? Well, this is in the shop. We give secrets away. And this is always tied on one of my rods when I'm sight fishing in the spring. And I've encountered bedfish that when you throw a tube or a lizard or a drop shot or a wacky rig, they won't respond. But when you slow twitch this bait in their bed, over their bed, and I'll do it the same way I do as that topwater style. I'll twitch it, jerk it hard, I'll let it float back up. Twitch it, and once it gets to the middle of their bed, twitch it, let it float, I let it sit there. And there's something about this original floater, especially in the 9-11 sizes, that spawning fish sees it up there and he can't take it. And this is a killer lure when fish are spawning. Before we get on the next one, just real quick, want to talk to you about 2 modifications I generally make to this bait. The one is I usually add a snap or a split ring to the nose of that bait. You can use any regular O-ring, a round or oval style O-ring. You could also use just a traditional snap, a snap swivel. I like that extra connection on the front. Also gives it just a hair bit more weight. So I like to add a snap or a swivel. And the other thing I'll add is I'll change the hooks. And when I'm using it on the surface, either as a topwater lure or when the fish are bedding, I love adding a feathered treble to that rear hook. Just something about that little extra buoyancy and flash in the back. Looks real, sort of looks more injured. And it seems like I get a better hookup percentage when I use that feather on the rear, topwater style or bed fishing. And then the new one that I love on these original floating minnows are the bladed trebles. And when I'm using this bait as a jerk bait, I'm going to use that VMC bladed treble, and it's just basically a same treble hook. It's got a little tiny blade on it. I like to use it on the front hooks, either that belly hook or that front hook. And it gives the bait just a little extra flash when you're fishing it as a jerk bait. Also going to give it a little extra weight. One last thing before we get on to the next old school bait is the Rapala original floating minnows are light. So I really prefer on these 2 sizes, the 9 and the 11, I prefer to throw them on a spinning rod, and I'll use light braid. I'll use 8 to 15 pound braid. 10 pound braid is perfect. And I'll use a fluorocarbon leader. I'll use a 4 to 3 foot fluorocarbon leader when I'm fishing it as a jerk bait. I'll use fluorocarbon. When I'm fishing this on the surface as a topwater or for those spawning fish, I'm going to use a short leader, 12 inches to 36 inches of mono, okay? So spinning rod, light braid to mono or fluorocarbon, depending on how you're using it. And that's a great little tip to help get this light bait further out, okay? So my first old school bait that still works today, especially for big bass, is an Rapala Original Floaty Minnow. All right, number 2, had to go with the soft plastic, right? Because there are some really old soft plastics that still work today. There's a lot of good ones, but I kept going back to a category that people sort of forgot about, especially up in the Northeast, in the Midwest, on the West Coast. In the South, people still use this a little bit, but in a lot of places in the country, this one, people forgot about this plastic shape. An old school lure number 2 for me that still works today, just as good, maybe better, is a plastic lizard. A plastic lizard. Look at that thing. Such a simple bait. And if you look at these lizards, no matter what brand you're throwing, I love this one. This is the Berkeley Power Lizard. But no matter what brand you're throwing, they all look relatively the same. You can get them from 4 inches. This one right here happens to be a 6-inch. You can get them from 4 inches all the way up to 8 and 10-inch lizards. But for sure, right there, that is my favorite size lizard of all time. Favorite size lizard of all time. It's the 6-inch Power Lizard. And when you look at it, it's a pretty simple bait, right? It's almost a cross between a traditional rubber worm, right? A regular plastic worm, and a creature bait. It's a good mix between the two. And I think that's one of the reasons this lizard is so good, okay? So you look at it, it's got just an elongated body. It has 4 sets of little curl arms, which throw off a little vibration. And then, of course, it has that bigger curl tail on the bottom. The other thing these old school lizards are going to have, and it's really a critical part to this bait, is they have a flatter bottom than they do a top, right? If you look at it, if I lay it flat, the back of that lizard's rounded like a regular worm. But when I hold that lizard up, you're going to see that the belly of that lizard is flat. It's very flat. And as we talk about rigging methods for this thing, you're going to see why this lizard is so good with that flat bottom. Before we get into rigging and techniques, let me address this. Why a lizard, right? You might say, we don't have lizards where we fish. The lake and river that I fish, we don't have lizards or salamanders. So why use a lizard? You know, this is the one time where match to hatch is important. And a lot of places do have lizards, right? They have salamanders, newts, water dogs. But this is the one time where I think this shape looks like a lot of other things besides just a lizard. When you see this falling and swimming in the water, it could be a crawfish, it could be a worm, it could be a snake, it could be an eel, it could be a lamprey. There's a lot of types of forage this imitates. And here's the reality of a lizard. It looks alive, and fish want to eat it, and they want to kill it, okay? All right, so there it goes. Old school bait number 2 is an old school plastic lizard. Rigging-wise, there are 2 primary ways that I rig a lizard by itself, and then a third one that I want to talk about, okay? Let's keep with the 2 primary rigging methods. The first one's easy. You're going to know the first one. And the first one is, I love a lizard on a good old Texas rig. A good old Texas rig. And, you know, the main thing on rigging this on a Texas rig is that hook. And when you look at the thickness of that bait, right? It's got that flat side to it. And a lizard is pretty thin, right? It's not like a big bulky tube or a big bulky, you know, giant crawl or something. It's pretty thin. And because of that, I want you to pick a standard offset worm hook, okay? Not an EWG, not a straight shank. I want you to use an offset hook, okay? I want you to use an offset hook. And this one is a 3/0 VMC offset worm hook. Depending on the size of your lizard, anything from 2/0 all the way up to a 5/0 if you're using that big 8-inch can work. But the 3/0 offset hook is perfect. And then on weight, just use your traditional worm weight, whatever size weight you would normally use. That weight right there, it's a VMC tungsten worm weight. I use them from sizes from a 1/16 ounce, real light, all the way up to 3/8 or a ½ ounce, okay? So your favorite worm weight, and then just your regular Texas style. And it's real simple. I'm just gonna go in the nose of the bait, about 1/8 of an inch. I'm gonna pull it out, gonna go around the bend of that hook, and then I wanna bring that point of that hook into the body, and I just wanna make sure that the lizard stays nice and straight. And I'll actually push it through a few times, get it working, create a little, almost like a little channel in the plastic, so that when that fish bites, you'll get them hooked. But notice the lizard Texas style is nice and straight. So what's the bonus of Texas rigging a lizard versus a worm or a tube or a crawl? And I can tell you one of the main things, if you look at it, is it's a lot of action in a little package, right? A lot of times you have a lot of action, but you have these big arms, giant tail. These arms are real tight to the body. They're subtle. Even the tail is pretty, it's a little curl tail, but it's subtle. So it's a lot of action in a compact package. The other great thing, and I'm going to mention it, you heard me talk about it before, is it's got a flat bottom. And I always want that flat bottom to be going the opposite way of the bend of the hook, right? So the flat bottom is going to be on the bottom when you're looking at it. And because of that, when that lizard falls, if I throw next to a dock or a log and that lizard falls, that flat bottom catches water. And the lizard, instead of falling straight, it has a little more of a glide to it because of that flat bottom, okay? So Texas rig, lizard, fishing around brush, docks, wood, grass, any kind of cover, and especially Texas rigging it around spawning fish. There's something about that lizard in a bed when you're shaking it that those fish don't like. Is it the size? Is it the extra action? Is it the length? Is it the fact that it looks like an actual lizard? I can't answer that. But I can tell you a Texas rig lizard in the beds has been 30 years ago and still is a great technique, okay? So technique number one for our lizard, we're gonna Texas rig it. Technique number two, and I'm gonna just pop the weight off to show you this, is a lizard on a Carolina rig. And a Carolina rig is a great lure to search. The good news is the hook we're gonna use for that lizard on the Carolina rig, it's the same hook. The same exact hook you'd use when you Texas rigged it is the same hook we're gonna use on a Carolina rig. I like that 3/0 regular offset hook on a 5-6-inch lizard. Look at it, fits it perfect. It's a perfect size for it. When we rig it, we want to make sure that flat side is on the bottom, right? So the point is going against the top of that lizard. It's going to opposite way of the flat bottom, right? And then our Carolina rig, there's going to be a space between our weight and our bait. And you can use the same exact weight, same exact tungsten bullet weight. You can use a barrel weight. You can use any kind of weight you want, a tungsten slider. VMC makes a great weight called a tungsten slider. But you're going to put that weight on first, and then you're going to have a swivel. And that swivel breaks the weight from the lure. And it's a great way to search for fish when you're not throwing at a specific piece of cover. So when you're pitching and flipping and casting at a tree, Texas rig it. But if you don't have anything that you're casting at, it's more open water, try a Carolina rig, okay? The weight separated by a barrel swivel to that lizard. I really like fluorocarbon. I use a heavier main line to the barrel swivel and then one size down in my leader. So I like a lot when I'm Carolina rigging, I'll fish a 15-pound main line to a 12-pound leader or a 17-pound main line to a 15-pound leader. And that lizard, as you drag it, slowly comes behind that weight and then just drifts down. You could cover so much water. And again, because of that flat bottom, when that thing's on a Carolina rig, instead of just, as you pull it, instead of it just going down, its instinct is to glide behind that weight. And it eventually settles down. And when you pull it, it lifts back and settles back down. That, with those little appendages, makes it one of the best lures you can fish on a Carolina rig, okay? Last but not least, and I wanted to just throw this out there, a lizard makes a great trailer for a jig or a chatterbait style lure. When I'm fishing it as a trailer, the one thing I usually do is I'll bite it down a little bit. So I'll bite the head off of it to make it a little more compact, or a lot of times when I want a real compact bait, I'll cut it in half and thread it on the back of a jig or a chatterbait. The great thing about that is you get all that extra action, and certain times of the year, that as a trailer can really be a big deal. All right, old school lure number 2 that still works today is the good old-fashioned plastic lizard. All right, number 3 on old school lures that have been around forever that still work today, and I still carry these in my boat. I know a lot of you are going to be shocked. Maybe you're going to gasp right now when I tell you this, but I have to. And I have to give this secret away. You've heard me talk about it before as a lure that's in my panic box. Well, it's old school and it catches as many fish today as it did 20, 30, 40 years ago. And it's the good old inline spinner. Inline spinner. And when it comes to a lure that catches anything that swims, from cold water species like trout to panfish to bass to pike, even in saltwater, I don't know that there's ever been a bait made that catches more fish than an inline spinner. When you look at the construction of an inline spinner, it's such a simple design. And it's basically a short wire with a weight. It's a blade has a clevis, a C clevis, that's in line on that wire. Look at that, right? That's going to spin. And then behind that inline wire and weight is your hook. And treble hook or a single hook is just as good. And this thing, from the standpoint of looking like a small bait fish that's lost, that's all alone, I don't know that there's a better lure for that. You know, this spinner works in every condition, but for me, it's at its best when things get tough. So, you know, when I'm talking about a cold front or crystal clear water, or I'm fishing a tournament and there are 20 boats in front of me and they're all fishing spinner baits and chatterbaits, heavy fishing pressure. They're the kind of scenarios where this good old school inline spinner still work, okay? So when things get tough, I'm very inclined to go to this. The other thing is I'll carry inline spinners with different blades. And remember, the general rule of thumb for spinner baits is the same with inline spinners. You want more flash, cleaner water, a willow style. The rooster tails are great. You want more vibration, the water's dirtier, a Colorado blade. A Panther Martin is great. But this is my all-time favorite because it's right in the middle. And this is an Indiana blade. It's a cross between a willow and a Colorado, right? It's a teardrop-looking blade. They call it the Indiana-style blade. And it's got flash and vibration mixed together. And that's why this is my favorite type of inline. This is a bait by Blue Fox, a lot of other ones out there, MEPS, a lot of great companies. But I love these inline spinners under tough fishing conditions. And I'll use a fairly steady retrieve with these lures. The main thing to think about is, you know, I like to always have a pause or a jerk thrown in that retrieve. So I've seen too many people throw an inline and they just burn it the whole way back and make a next cast. Every time I cast it, somewhere during my steady retrieve, I throw in a pause or I throw in just a little jerk. Because as that blade spins, right, that blade is steady. When that blade's spinning, I want there to be little interruptions in the movement. Just like a spinnerbait, a crankbait, a chatterbait, I want little interruptions in the movement. So a steady retrieve with a pause or just a little, quick little jerk in it will make that spinner change direction. The other thing, don't be afraid to throw it near cover. It's a little more limited than, say, a spinnerbait with heavy cover, but I throw this the same places I would, say, a soft swim bait, right? I throw it around cover. I throw it near docks, near trees, the same places you would throw your spinnerbait. Most of the time, that inline spinner will work, okay? So when things get tough, I don't think there's a better old school lure than the inline spinner. All right, there's 3 for you. And if you're like me and you've got lures from 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, go through those old boxes, pull out some of these old style baits, and you're still going to catch big bass on them today. I hope you enjoyed this one. 3 old school lures that still work today. If you like these In the Shop series, do me a favor. Stop right now. Hit that subscribe button. We get you great content every week. If you're already a subscriber to Mike Iaconelli Fishing on YouTube, do me a favor. Tell your fishing friend, tell your fishing buddy about the channel. Lots of content coming once a week straight to you. Hope you enjoyed this one talking about old school lures. We're out here in the shop.